Greetings from the county line. Again, we're not at the county line. We've branched out a little bit, taken it to the street, looking for some major dudes to tell you how it really is, tell it like it is. As you know from last week, I've found a true philosopher who in my mind is someone who's always sought enlightenment, never closed their mind, always open to new ideas, not just through reading, but through life experiences, by making mistakes and suffering the consequences for them, and then reflecting on that to see how all these things might apply to the human spirit today. So we were talking a little bit ago, Michael, about something I'd seen in the news yesterday where some states, I think 7 in total now, have initiated laws or proposed laws that would require Pornhub, which is some sort of a adult website, to limit their viewing to adults. It seems pretty common sense to me, but I'm watching the news yesterday, which I don't do a lot of, I admit, but I had that happen in the news on, and some lawyer was explaining why it's a right for children to be able to watch pornography online and have access to it. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that. I know you're an old liberal, and there was probably a time in all of our lives when we thought pornography was a good male curiosity, if nothing else.
Well, yeah, I have an instant thought. That person that you're referring to, my initial thought is bat crap, crazy, left extreme.
Well, he's an ACLU attorney.
Yeah,
I know you at least used to belong to the
well,
ACLU.
I still do, but I almost regularly reconsider my membership because they're not what they once were, because they've been compromised by wokeness, as so much of our culture has been.
Okay.
But this is just
Can I stop you for just a minute?
Yes.
I need somebody to tell me what wokeness
Okay,
is exactly.
here's my view of wokeness, and I think this is objectively accurate. Wokeness began authentically, and I think favorably, as an effort to recognize that we need to continue our work toward perfecting a more perfect union, the ideals that were set forth in the founding of this great nation, the greatest nation in the history of the world. And by virtue of that recognition, let's teach history as it really happened. Let's tell the truth. Let's include stories that involved lynchings. Let's include stories that involved ravaging of black communities and the so-called Tulsa environment that was considered an economic mecca for African Americans during that point in history. Let's include those stories rather than neglect and refute them or ignore them and obscure them. And let's recognize where maybe we've made a couple of errors in making heroic figures out of people that were not quite as heroic as we once thought. That seemed to be a reasonable venture, and I think an accurate representation of what wokeness intended to be. Then it went wacky. And it went wacky with people that think children need to be exposed to pornography. And it went wacky.
That was the turning point?
No, there were many turning points. I'm just using that as an illustration. It went wacky with thoughts that 6-year-olds should determine their own sexual identity. It went wacky with pronouns associated with people's names. It went wacky with our inability to speak frankly in our open minds, meaning no hostility and no intentional malice in using terms in a historical context. There's a recent show as an example of this, I think on Netflix, that reproduced a motion picture version of a best-selling author involving the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the pursuit of the conspirators involving his death, and of course the ultimate killing of his assassin and the capture and later execution of some members of that conspiracy. Throughout that motion picture, there are numerous references by the characters toward blacks using the N-word, a horrific and clearly racist designation. But you come away from watching that film with an abhorrent feel for what those people suffered by that racism of that historical period. Not offended by the fact that the characters are using those terms. Wokeness would object to that out of hand and find this so abhorrent that we can't use such terminology. We can't make reference to those. They have no sense of context. And there are so many examples of people in academia and other occupations, comedians and other professions, who have lost their jobs for using terms that had no intention of malice, that had no intention nor contextual reference points of being racist or sexist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But woke culture has canceled them, has taken them out of being recognized as being acceptable, and that's where wokeness has gone off course historically, and that's where we've suffered such inanity that someone would contemplate that children purposely should be exposed to pornography. Evidence is compelling that pornography is damaging to adults and damaging to women and damaging to our sense of equality among gender. So the mere thought that someone would try to defend that children should have access and exposure to that just demonstrates the absolute incredible loss of intelligence and common sense and common decency that our culture has evolved to in the name of this new ostensibly claimed virtue known as wokeness. And so, yeah, I find it so objectionable and so horrific that we even contemplate such a thing. And I could give you example after example after example.
This is just one example, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. One example of the dangers that are lurking on the dark web, wherever it is, that are reaching out not just to our children, but to all of us, right?
Oh, of course, and especially to try to promote children having free access. Most reasonably minded researchers conclude that free access and open access to the internet by children is so damaging, and is a major cause of our contemporary crisis of anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation and harmful behaviors among our children and adolescents. I have a pediatrician that is a physician for my daughter and my youngest daughter and my youngest son, who recently explained to me that she has seen children as young as 4 representing symptoms that are consistent with anxiety or consistent with depression. Children who have no concept of what those things even are. And there's something about our culture that has compromised our children's resilience, our children's capacity to enjoy a healthy life. And this madness that you just illustrated by that example is feeding into that destruction. We have, you know, the recent example of the mishap in Baltimore, where the barge went astray and wrecked into the bridge. That's such a meaningful metaphor of where our culture is today.
How so?
We've lost command of our sensibility. We've allowed, in my judgment, I think the progressive left is more dangerous, quite frankly, than even the far right. But I think both extremes are collapsing in on the middle, and are proving to be destructive to our society and to our democratic ideal. And the price that's being paid currently is being paid by our children. And it's just unfathomable that as adults we seemingly are willing to stand by or sit by idly and allow this to happen.
How's a parent supposed to regulate their child's access to these dangerous influences, though, in modern society when, gosh, it seems like every kid over 12 years old has a phone stuck in their pocket somewhere?
Well, take them away. And, you know,
is that realistic?
It is realistic, because parental responsibility involves taking responsibility. And, you know, most recommendations from professionals who oversee the mental health and the best behavior that we can try to induce on our children suggests that if you do provide phones, for example, cell phones, to children, that by 8 o'clock in the evening, those should be put in a drawer somewhere. Those should be retrieved back from children. Take them away and put them in your drawer. There has to be limits. There has to be boundaries. We have to, you know, like we had when we were children. There were boundaries for us, and we created a boundless culture. And again, I find us complicit in this as adults. We're allowing this to happen, and I don't exclude myself in this criticism. I've got a dear friend, and you know him, and he's a friend of many of us. I greatly respect him. As you made reference to him, I'm an old school liberal. He's a Republican, Mike Karakoff, but I think he's a very decent man. I think he's a fine representation of what a genuine politician should be, a servant to the people. And I called him just several days ago with some purported outrage that, Michael, you need to do something. I'm one of your constituents. I need help. Did you see the Surgeon General's announcement? We've got a crisis. We got to do something about phones in schools. And he said, Michael, we did it last year. We've already passed laws in Indiana. I'll send you a copy. And I was at best bemused and quite frankly embarrassed to have to acknowledge that, wow, okay, we already have a law that instructs all of our schools that they should have, but he said the compromise that was created in the law that was met by dealing with teachers and by dealing with parents, all of whom wanted to have their fingers in the construction of the law and wanted to voice their concerns that, wait a minute, my child needs to call me after school, or wait a minute, I'm a teacher and I know more about education than you do. And they compromised, but the law says every school system in the state of Indiana has to have a specific articulable policy about the use of phones, because every evidence shows that they are destructive to the learning process. They're destructive to college students in the learning process. I witnessed it firsthand. I used to, when you could get away with it before the inmates took over the asylum, and that is the students controlling outcomes, I used to have students leave the classroom. If you want to use your phone, just go outside. Leave the class. You're not welcome here. You're not here to learn. You're here to talk to your neighbor or call your girlfriend.
Not only that, but my grandson admitted here 2 weeks ago, not here, but in my shop when he came to visit, that he thinks those devices are making us stupid. He said, I don't have to learn anything anymore. If I want to know something, I can look it up.
Well, there's certainly
Anything.
I think there's certainly, there's as with so many things, there's two sides to a coin. There is a benefit that I may not know how to make a cinnamon roll, but if I've got a cell phone, I sure as heck can find out with a flash of a button. Mm-hmm. That's a discernible benefit, to access information at the touch of a button, just a scroll, and there's certainly a benefit to that. But it also does, on the flip side of that, sort of detract from one's effort to invest in that learning process. It becomes so easy, it becomes so convenient, and it becomes so open to misinformation. And that's obviously a horse of another color, that we could go down that rabbit hole. We are a society of misinformation, and these devices and these types of communications have invited a host of problems with misinformation into our culture. And so now people operate on the basis of opinion rather than fact. They just, many people don't discern fact whatsoever. They just accept, I've got an opinion, that's correct, and yours is not, and there's no point to discuss it further. There's no reasonable dialogue. There's no reasonable meeting point where we can look into this and maybe discern that, you know what, maybe you weren't as right as you thought, or maybe I wasn't. Now we operate on the basis of whoever told us what we are supposed to think, and many times that's China or Russia.
At least, apparently, somebody in Indianapolis, Michael Karikoff, who, you're right, he's exceptional, I think, are paying some attention to issues that may truly be important to us as Hoosiers. Beyond screen time, what other things do you think people are really concerned about, but they just don't come to the forefront? What issues should our politicians be thinking about?
Well,
is immigration that big a deal? Is gun violence that big a deal? Is crime a big deal? Is the economy a big deal? Is abortion a big deal?
I think those invite reasonable differences of view on some of those points, abortion being noteworthy among them in my judgment, because I would express an opinion that would not be shared by many. I think abortion is not an issue of a right to life. It's more of an issue of trying to control women's identity and women's control of their bodies, and trying to control medical profession intervention on behalf of women's needs. And there's compelling evidence of that. There's scientific evidence of that. Babies are dying as a consequence of restrictions on access to medical care that abortion laws have constructed in recent
I'd argue
times.
that.
There's,
I think those numbers were inflated back in the early 70s when...
These are relatively recent numbers, and the statistics are mounting of problems in women fleeing states where they have restrictions on access to medical care.
Weren't there more abortions, legal abortions, last year than there were the year before?
Yes.
Even in the wake of all this legislation that's, I don't even want to go to abortion.
Well, no.
I mean, as a Catholic, you know.
No, I know. I said that my opinion would be objectionable to many, including you.
Which is okay. I'm not canceling you.
No, and I don't intend to cancel you. That's the point, that we ought to be able to have reasonable conversation about it. Those reasonable conversations don't occur very much these days.
No.
And in part because of this formation of information that now occurs that really is not factual information. It's misinformation. It's opinion-led dialogue, and construction, and it's detrimental to our own individual capacity to think and to learn, and it's detrimental to our free society. And I think evidence will reveal that. I think it is revealing that as we speak. So those are concerns. But in answer to your specific question, we just had a Surgeon General issue a report that gun violence is the leading cause of death of children in America.
4,000 a year.
That's such a remarkable statement for the most advanced civilization in the history of the world. That we continents, our children are dying from gun play. Something ought to be done about that. And something ought to be done about that without us having to sit here and talk about it. And there's certainly some type of unique form of madness that possesses us in our society that prevents us from reaching some type of recognizable consensus that this madness needs to stop. That people want to construct some interpretation of the Second Amendment that if I have enough machine guns in my closet, whatever the latest version of an F-15 won't be able to blow my house apart. I don't know what they think. That a well-regulated militia is going to stop the government from taking you out? It's absurd.
They've never seen what an A-10 can do with that big machine gun.
No, they certainly haven't. We got some naive people stockpiling these weapons of mass destruction. We just had a Supreme Court that just allowed, as you well know, these bump stocks that convert semi-automatic weaponry into machine guns. And we have mass shootings. One a week. They don't even make the news anymore. They're not even newsworthy. No. And literally, not figuratively, literally, I generally drop my children off to school and pick them up because I have more free time than my partner, my wife, Amanda. And I look in the rearview mirror and I acknowledge to myself that may be the last time I see her. That may be the last time I see him. That's just. It just impresses me as unconscionable. What have we done? What has happened to us? And what's worse, our children know that. Our children have to exist in an educational environment where they believe.
They do active shooter drills at school.
Where they believe it may be the last time they see their mom or their dad or the brother or their sister, and so forth. So that's one of the things. Gun violence. Clearly, we need to address, and we need to address yesterday, not today. But there's a host of those kind of issues that we're a house divided in our culture today, and we just can't seem to find a way to. It's so evident. It's so clearly evident that our governmental process has stalemated. To the point that Chris Cuomo, I have some respect for him as a news person. He represents a news person on the channel and that I regularly view, and he refers to it as the game. It's just gamesmanship to these people. Mm-hmm. They just go after each other constantly, back and forth, back and forth. The game is more important than solving the issue. Immigration, is immigration important? I think it is important. It certainly is important because we're flooding cities with lacking the capacity to absorb the people, even if we wanted to welcome them, even if we accept that. We're lacking the capacity to take care of them. We're lacking the capacity to educate them. We're lacking the capacity to feed them, to provide work for them, to provide medical care for them. And rather than fix it, because both sides don't want to fix it, they want to fight about it. And when one side tries to fix it, the other one thwarts that effort. Both sides have done this back and forth, back and forth. And So yes, there's a number of social issues that plague us, but I almost think it might be to the point we need to sort of scrap the playbook and start over and create some rules about, you know, the old adage of term limits and restructuring who the players are, so that we get somebody's attention, that we really have some people that are willing to make an effort to resolve on our collective behalf some resolution.
What about some of these side issues that we hear about in politics, like the war in Israel, the Gaza thing? And you know, you spend a lot of time on college campuses with college kids in the modern society. What is going on with these young people that they want to support the Palestinians in this effort?
Again, they're, in my judgment, if I can use a broad brush stroke, they're bat crap crazy. They're when you have gays for Palestine, they misconstructed some sense of reality, because when they go to Palestine, they're in for a rude awakening. How that's going to end?
Is there really a group gays for Palestine?
Oh yes, we have representation of these college groups.
So they're ignorant, really.
They're ignorant. They're just uninformed. Our educational system has really collapsed. We've taken civics out of our K-12. We've abandoned many of our fundamental virtuous foundation stones of an educational process, and it's come to fruition now. Unfortunately, the fruit is poisonous, and that's what we're witnessing. These are entitled. Number one, no one can afford college anymore. No one can afford to go to a university. We can't afford to send our kids. I've got two younger children, as you know, 13 and 14, and I have this obsession that they have to have a college education. We have to get them into a university. I don't have a clue how that's going to happen without indenturing them for the next 50 years of their lives to paying off a debt. My wife, Amanda, is still paying off college debt. And she's been a social worker for 15 years, and we're still paying off her college debt.
I have a friend who has suggested that the reason college is so expensive is because you can borrow money to pay for it now from the government. They make it look so attractive that colleges saw that and started raising tuition. What was the tuition at Johns Hopkins when you started your undergraduate studies?
It was expensive by even those standards at that time, and now it's out of reach.
Well, in 1975 at Ball State University, one class for 1/4 hour was $100.
Yeah, that's probably $400 now, I would guess.
So
I would speculate.
It's a very nice campus.
I don't know factually, but I would suggest there's more sinister problems to the costing calculation. We have so many more administrative laden. You know, we have deans of diversity and deans of correctness, and we have nonsensible positions that are being funded, and again tied to wokeness and the political correctness of our times that outnumber educators. You know, educators take a back seat now to administrative functions and support personnel. We have more support personnel than we have, if you will, operational personnel, and that's obviously lopsided. Mm-hmm. And that has escalated the cost. Colleges and universities are now businesses. They're not educational institutions. They're businesses. They're in the business to make money, and
just like hospitals.
Yes,
that's another topic.
No. I mean, capitalism has its virtues, but it also has its faults, and we're seeing some of those fault lines starting to represent themselves in our society, and certainly in education. Those fault lines have become significant fissures. They've become significant problems.
Well, I'm not sure we've given anybody any clear direction in the last half an hour, but you've certainly tried. I appreciate you sitting down with me here on this park bench on what turned out to be a beautiful afternoon.
Yeah, we got some light cracking through the clouds.
I hope you'll hang around for a while because I got some other things I want to talk to you
Sure,
about.
I enjoy our time together.
And to the rest of you, we'll see you next week. God bless.